Chapter 1. Have you ever felt your own mind slipping away? Silver burned through my veins like liquid fire, and truth be told, I welcomed the agony. Deep down, I knew the truth. I deserved this pain. I was a monster. I chained myself to the cold stone wall of the dungeon. The heavy metal bit deeply into my wrists. Because of that, my blood dripped onto the floor. I watched the red drops fall in the dim light. Without warning, the beast inside me roared. It clawed at my ribs. It wanted to break free. It wanted blood. But then I pulled the silver chains even tighter. I gasped for air. I fought the chains. I fought the beast. I fought my own fractured mind. Have you ever watched someone you love turn into a monster right in front of you? I saw my father lose his mind to the madness years ago. I watched him tear our home apart, piece by piece. I locked myself away because the monster inside me craved innocent blood, just like his did. I wouldn't let that happen to my people. Even so, the pain was blinding. Sweat stung my eyes. The smell of my own singed flesh filled the dark cell. What followed was an hour of pure torture. I closed my eyes. The memory of that dark night flashed in my mind. The night my inner court poisoned my wine. Who was the shadow watching from the door while I choked? I still didn't know. That open question haunted my every waking moment. Eventually, the morning light crept through the tiny window. The full moon was finally gone. As if the world narrowed, my breathing slowed down. My bones snapped back into human shape with a sickening crunch. It hurt so much. Yet, I survived another night. As the silence stretched, a heavy knock echoed through the room. "My king!" a guard called out. "We caught a trespasser!" And just like that, everything changed. I forced myself to stand up. My muscles screamed in protest. Still, I grabbed a towel and wiped the blood from my chest. I had to play the part. I had to be the ruthless alpha king. I put on my dark robes. My hands shook slightly. Despite that, I stood tall. I walked out of the cell. The air in the hallway felt cold against my damp skin. Moments later, I heard the whispers of the guards. They feared me. They hated me. And honestly, I wanted them to. I built these walls to keep them safe from the monster hiding under my skin. By the time I reached the grand staircase, I buried my pain deep down. I locked the beast in a cage in my mind. So, I walked toward the throne room to face the new day. That's why I never smiled anymore. I was a king trapped in a nightmare. Soon after, the heavy wooden doors to the hall opened for me. The court was waiting, and a storm was brewing. Chapter 2. The throne room smelled like fear, sweat, and cheap perfume. I sat on the cold iron throne. I looked down at the lords and ladies of my court. They bowed in fear. They whispered in secret. They waited for me to fall. Meanwhile, I kept my face blank. I wore the mask of a tyrant because fear was the only leash that kept them safe from me. At the same time, the feral curse hummed under my skin. It was a dark, ugly thing. I gripped the arms of the throne until my knuckles turned white. I didn't speak because my voice would betray the growl trapped in my throat. Do you remember a time when your home felt safe? I remembered a time before the curse. The court used to be full of laughter. There was music and dancing. Now there was only silence and terror, which meant I was doing my job. I was keeping the beast contained. Next, the heavy wooden doors crashed open. The guards dragged a girl into the room. She was a rogue werewolf. Her clothes were torn. She was fighting them with wild, untamed fury. In that moment, she looked up. The moment our eyes locked, the world stopped. Her eyes were a fierce, burning amber. As if pulled by a string, my beast slammed against the cage in my mind. But it wasn't trying to attack her. It was kneeling. With her scent in the air, everything went quiet. The constant, agonizing roar in my head simply vanished. The scent of pine, rain, and wild magic filled my lungs. Time stood still. For the first time in years, the pain stopped. Before I could move, she thrashed against the guards. "Let me go!" she screamed. A growl rose in my throat. It wasn't my human voice. It was the Alpha. My body moved on instinct. Without thinking, I stood up from the throne. As the silence roared in the massive hall, every lord stepped back in pure terror. They thought I was going to kill her. Truth be told, I wanted to kill the men holding her. My chest ached with a sudden, violent need to protect this stranger. As the tension broke, I walked down the stone steps. With every step I took, the court held its breath. I stopped right in front of her. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. Instead, she lifted her chin. She glared at me with lethal vigilance. Between one breath and the next, I felt it. The tether. A spark of magic danced between us. Something inside me shifted. I knew I couldn't let her go. I claimed her as my own prisoner because my wolf would have slaughtered anyone else who touched her. "She is mine," I ordered. My voice was a low, dark rumble. As if fate demanded it, the guards quickly let her go. She stumbled, but I caught her arm. As fire bloomed beneath my skin, a shocking wave of peace washed over my cursed soul. I had to know who she was. I dragged her toward the dungeons, leaving the shocked court behind. Chapter 3. Her scent hit me like a physical blow to the chest. We walked down the damp stone steps into the royal holding cells. The smell of pine and rain wrapped around me. As the bond pulsed, my feral beast purred like a giant cat. It was a terrifying feeling. I threw her into a cell and locked the iron door. Then I stood outside the bars. I stared at her in the dim light. She paced the small room like a trapped predator. What would you do if the thing you feared most became your only hope? I couldn't kill her because she was the only thing that made the dark voices in my head stop. Yet, I didn't know anything about her. I didn't know her name. I didn't know her past. More importantly, I didn't know what kind of dark magic she possessed. I stepped closer to the iron bars. Under the weight of my stare, she stopped pacing. She looked right at me. Her body was tense. Her fists were clenched. "Why did you spare me?" she asked. Her voice trembled just a little. Before the words left my lips, I hesitated. I couldn't tell her the truth. I couldn't tell her she was curing my madness just by standing there. So, I lied. "You crossed into my territory," I said. My tone was icy and flat. "You broke the law." She scoffed. She walked right up to the bars. She was so close I could feel her body heat. The space between us burned. "You are a tyrant," she spat out. "You lock yourself away. You rule with terror, but you have no idea what is actually out there." As the truth unraveled, I frowned. What was she talking about? "What are you running from?" I asked softly. In the quiet that followed, she looked away. Shadows danced between us. She was terrified, but not of me. She was terrified of something else. Who was hunting her in the shadows? That was the second question that now burned in my mind. "If you keep me here," she whispered, looking back into my eyes, "you will bring a war to your doorstep. They are coming for me." As the echo faded, my instincts surged. A deep, violent protective urge took over my senses. As if summoned, my wolf pressed forward against my mind. It wanted to tear apart anyone who dared to threaten her, and I let it happen. "Let them come," I growled, gripping the iron bars. "I am the king. No one takes what is mine." When the word mine left my lips, her breath caught. Her world tilted, and I saw a flash of shock in her amber eyes. We were enemies. We were strangers. But at the same time, we were tied together by a magic I didn't understand. To make things worse, I knew keeping her here was a deadly mistake. But I didn't care. Between us, something cracked. The ice around my heart began to melt. I walked away from the cell, leaving her in the dark. Come morning, I would find out exactly who this rogue really was, no matter the cost. Chapter 4. Have you ever touched a live electrical wire? Have you ever felt the raw, buzzing energy stop your heart? That is exactly what it felt like when I dragged her into my private study. The massive room was freezing, smelling of old, dusty parchment and bitter wood smoke. Yet her presence heated the air like a roaring furnace. From there, I slammed the heavy oak door shut and locked it tight. She backed away instantly. She stood by the massive glass window. Her bright amber eyes darted around the room. She was looking for an exit because a cornered wolf is always the most dangerous creature in the forest. More importantly, my own feral beast was violently pacing inside my mind. It didn't want to hurt her. It wanted to claim her. It wanted to protect her. I forced my human mind to take the reins because losing control meant losing her forever. I had to remain the cold, unfeeling tyrant. "Sit down," I ordered. My voice was a low, terrifying rumble. Instead, she grabbed a heavy, solid brass candlestick right off my desk. Without warning, she swung the metal weapon right at my head. I ducked just in time. The heavy brass smashed into the stone wall behind me, sending sparks flying into the air. Before I could move, she lunged toward the locked door. I caught her around the waist. Her body felt small, but it was packed with fierce, untamed fighting muscle. She kicked and clawed like a wildcat. In the span of a breath, everything went horribly wrong. As she fought my grip, a blinding, terrifying light erupted from her chest. Gold and bright crimson energy blasted outward into the room. Not only that, but her strange magic slammed right into my cursed blood. My dark curse violently answered back. Black, shadowy veins crawled rapidly up my arms. The two ancient magics crashed together in midair. What followed was a massive, deafening shockwave. It threw us both backward across the room. We hit the hard stone floor, but then a glowing, burning tether appeared between us. It was a literal rope of fire and dark shadow connecting our chests. It pulsed, beating in time with my own heart. It faded a second later. My chest ached. My mind spun wildly. Why did her untamed magic feel like the exact missing half of my soul? That open question anchored itself deep in my broken mind. I needed her secrets. I needed her magic. I needed her close. I knew I couldn't treat her like a dirty prisoner anymore. So, I made a choice that would surely anger my entire kingdom. Chapter 5. Come morning, the entire Iron Citadel was whispering about my sudden madness. I broke centuries of strict royal law. I moved her out of the cold, filthy dungeons. I gave her the grandest, softest suite in the royal wing. I did it because my feral wolf threatened to tear my own throat out if she stayed in the damp, lonely dark. She deserved sunlight. She deserved silk. As a result, my war council was absolutely furious. They sat around the long, polished wooden table. They glared at me with open, nasty disgust. The air thickened with unspoken treason. "You are harboring a dangerous, filthy rogue, my king," Lord Draken hissed. His voice dripped with poisonous venom. I remembered the last time my court dared to question me. Years ago, my own uncle tried to take the throne because he genuinely thought my curse made me weak. I had to brutally execute him in this very room. The dark blood stain was still stubbornly glued to the floorboards. I was not afraid to spill more blood today. "She stays," I growled. My voice literally shook the glass windows in their frames. As the silence stretched, I stood up and abruptly left the room. My heart pounded heavily against my ribs. I was becoming deeply obsessed. The sweet smell of her, crushed pine needles and fresh rain, was permanently trapped inside my nose. As if pulled by a string, my feet carried me right to her new heavy oak door. I opened it softly. So softly. She was standing by the wide balcony. The chilly wind whipped her dark, messy hair around her beautiful face. She wore a soft, elegant silk dress now, but she still looked like a deadly warrior ready for blood. Under the weight of my stare, she slowly turned around. The space between us burned with an invisible, pulling heat. I wanted to touch her skin. I wanted to protect her smile. I wanted to hear her laugh. Why was she running so hard? Who were the dark shadows chasing her across the continent? Those dangerous questions still gnawed constantly at my fragile sanity. Deep down, I knew the truth. My flawless, rigid control was finally breaking apart. Choosing this wild, nameless girl over my loyal, powerful court was my first fatal mistake. Eventually, the terrible consequences of my selfish choice would arrive at my door with drawn swords. Chapter 6. That night, the shadows finally came for her. I was resting in the dark room next to hers. Suddenly, the sharp scent of rusted iron and strange, foul blood hit my nose. Without thinking, I threw off my heavy blankets. I kicked open the connecting wooden door with a loud crack. 4 large men in dark, ugly masks were standing in her room. One of them held a cruel silver blade right at her soft throat. Have you ever felt true, blinding, animalistic rage? It doesn't scream loudly. It whispers darkly in the back of your mind. Before either could speak, my iron control snapped completely. I didn't just shift. I willingly let the dark curse take the wheel. My human bones broke and reformed with sickening crunches. Sharp claws tore painfully through my skin. Coarse fur erupted along my aching spine. I became the terrifying monster everyone feared. Roar! I lunged, a violent blur of black fur and pure fury. I grabbed the first assassin by the thick neck. Snap! I threw his broken, lifeless body against the far wall. Warm red blood splattered across the pristine white silk sheets. Without another word, the second man slashed blindly at me. I didn't even feel the sharp blade cut my arm. My massive claws ripped his chest wide open. The metallic tang of fresh, hot blood filled the entire room. The last 2 cowards tried to run away. I caught them before they even reached the open balcony. My powerful jaws crushed solid bone. I tore them apart because they dared to touch my destined mate. Wait. Mate? The shocking word echoed loudly in my wolf's wild mind. In the quiet that followed, the luxurious room was painted in horrific blood. The cold moonlight shone brightly on the shattered glass and broken, twisted bodies. I stood right in the center, breathing heavily. I was half man, half beast. Hot blood dripped slowly from my deadly, curved claws. I slowly turned my massive head to look at her. I waited for her to scream in terror. I waited for her to call me a disgusting monster. I waited for her to run away from me. But she didn't. With every heartbeat, she slowly, bravely walked toward me. She didn't look down at the dead men. She looked right into my glowing, golden, cursed eyes. Before the words left her lips, she gently reached out her hand. Her small, warm fingers touched my blood-soaked, furry arm. My feral beast whimpered softly. It leaned eagerly into her gentle touch. "Who did this to you?" she whispered softly. As her wolf stirred, a single hot tear rolled down my furry face. She wasn't afraid of the deadly monster. She was the only person in the entire world who saw the broken, crying man trapped inside. And just like that, everything changed forever. We were no longer a cruel king and a captive prisoner. We were 2 shattered, bleeding souls tied to the exact same bloody fate. Chapter 7. Have you ever held a deadly secret that could burn a whole kingdom to the ground? I shifted back into my human form right in front of her. My bones snapped back into place with a sickening crunch. The pain was blinding. Still, I forced myself to stand tall in the bloody, ruined bedroom. I washed the blood from my hands. I washed the fear from my mind. I washed the lies from my home. I looked down at the dead men scattered on the floor. Because I needed to know who sent them, I knelt beside the largest assassin. I ripped the dark mask off his face. Without warning, my blood ran totally cold. A small silver crescent moon was tattooed right on his neck. It was the personal mark of Lord Vane. Vane was a highly respected lord, a supposed friend to all packs. Yet he was secretly sending killers into my home. In that moment, I slowly stood up. I turned to look at the girl. She was staring at the tattoo. Her body shook with a deep, silent terror. "You know this mark," I said. My voice was a low, dark rumble. "Who are you, really?" As the silence stretched, she took a shaky breath. Her amber eyes filled with heavy tears. She didn't look like a tough rogue anymore. She looked like a lost, broken child. "My name is Selah," she choked out. I am the daughter of the murdered king. My world tilted. The air thicked. She wasn't just a rogue. She was the lost royal heir, the true queen. Because of that, harboring her was suddenly a geopolitical nightmare. If Vayne was the one who slaughtered her entire pack years ago to steal her father's crown, then Vayne was the real monster. Do you remember when I told you about my father losing his mind? He went crazy because he trusted the wrong people. I wasn't going to make the same mistake. To make things worse, Vayne's men were already inside my walls. Who let them in? That open question made my skin crawl with paranoia. I stepped closer to Selah. I wiped a stray tear from her soft cheek. He killed my family, she whispered. He took my home. I know the feeling, I murmured softly. My chest ached with a sudden, fierce loyalty. I pulled her into my chest. She was my prisoner. She was my cure. She was my queen. I would protect her with my very life. This was the terrifying start of our new reality, and a massive war was already knocking on our front door. Chapter 8. Come morning, we went deep underground into the dark, dusty catacombs. I needed to teach her how to fight with her hidden magic. The heavy stone walls were dripping with cold water. The air smelled like old earth and secrets. Meanwhile, Selah stood in the center of the dark room. She looked so beautiful. She looked so deadly. Focus, I commanded. My voice echoed loudly off the ancient walls. Let the magic out, Selah. Because her magic was the only thing that calmed my dark curse, I craved it. I was literally addicted to her bright energy. She closed her eyes tightly. She pushed her hands forward. A tiny, warm spark of gold fire danced on her fingertips. But then, it flickered and died out. She groaned in deep frustration. I can't do it, she yelled. I am too afraid of it. Without another word, I walked up behind her. I didn't care about the rules anymore. I didn't care about being the cold tyrant. I wrapped my strong arms right around her small waist. I pulled her back flush against my hard chest. Between us, something cracked. Her breath caught in her throat. Don't be afraid, I whispered right into her ear. My hot breath sent shivers down her delicate neck. Your magic isn't a weapon to fear. It is a part of you. As if summoned, her body relaxed against mine. The smell of her sweet skin made my feral beast purr happily. I slowly ran my large hands down her soft arms. I grabbed her wrists. I intertwined my fingers with hers. The physical contact was incredibly intense. It was a steamy, hot wave of pure desire pooling low in my belly. Not only that, the dark, ugly curse in my mind went completely blissfully silent. Because my beast needed her touch to survive, I leaned down and softly kissed the sensitive skin just below her ear. She gasped loudly. Suddenly, a massive, brilliant wave of golden fire exploded from our joined hands. The bright light completely illuminated the dark catacombs. It was breathtaking. She turned around in my arms. Her amber eyes were wide with total wonder. She reached up and placed her warm hands flat on my chest. Her magic flowed right into my cursed heart like a soothing balm. You did that, she whispered. We did that, I corrected her gently. Deep down, she knew the truth. We were becoming entirely dependent on each other. But we couldn't hide down here forever because the real monster was waiting for us upstairs. Chapter 9. Eventually, the massive iron bells of the Citadel rang out loudly. It was time for the mandatory political summit. I stood in my bedroom, adjusting my heavy black crown. My stomach was tied in tight, painful knots. What followed was the hardest thing I ever had to do. I had to present Selah to the entire world. She walked into the room. I literally stopped breathing. She wore a stunning, blood-red silk gown. It clung perfectly to her curves. I claimed her as my official consort to give her legal, diplomatic protection from the court. She looked like a true, powerful queen. Are you ready? I asked softly, offering her my arm. No, she admitted, but I will be. Moments later, the heavy wooden doors of the great hall opened wide for us. The massive room was packed with hundreds of wealthy lords and ladies. We walked down the red carpet together. The whispers started instantly. They stared at her with hungry, suspicious eyes. As the wind shifted, a cold breeze blew through the open windows. A man stepped right into the center of the floor. He wore fine, expensive white silk. He smiled like a friend. He smelled like a demon. He ruled like a thief. It was Lord Vane. "King Kalen!" Vane called out cheerfully. "What a wonderful surprise! And who is this beautiful creature?" My feral beast violently slammed against my ribs. It wanted to rip his smiling face right off his skull. Despite that, I kept my face blank. I was the stone-cold tyrant again. I stepped forward and held out my hand to greet him. Because royal law demanded peace at a summit, I had to shake his dirty hand. Vane reached out. Our palms met. And just like that, the entire world stopped spinning. The moment our skin touched, my dark curse flared wildly. I inhaled deeply. Vane didn't just smell like expensive cologne. He smelled exactly like the dark, rotting magic inside my own veins. How was this possible? Because the exact same foul magic burning in my blood was somehow attached to his soul. What was Vane really hiding? Why did his blood smell exactly like my deadly curse? That terrible question screamed in my brain. As her wolf stirred, Selah squeezed my other arm tightly. She felt my panic through our hidden bond. Vane pulled his hand back slowly. He looked right at Selah. His cold, dead eyes twinkled with nasty amusement. "She has very familiar eyes," Vane whispered softly, just loud enough for me to hear. "She looks just like a ghost I buried years ago." He knew exactly who she was. The enemy wasn't just at the gates anymore. He was standing right inside my home, smiling directly at the girl I loved. I knew right then and there, blood was going to spill tonight. Chapter 10. Have you ever felt your own soul being ripped perfectly in half? That night, leaving her behind in the Citadel felt exactly like that. I locked Selah safely in my heavily guarded royal bedroom. I had to sneak out into the freezing, misty darkness. I had to raid Vane's temporary encampment outside the stone walls. Because I needed the truth, I was willing to risk everything. I wore a dark cloak. I carried a sharp silver blade. I carried a heavy, breaking heart. As the distance between us grew, my feral curse violently woke up. Without warning, the searing agony returned to my veins. Without her sweet scent to calm the beast, the madness clawed sharply at my mind. Roar! I clamped a hand tightly over my mouth. I fought the pain. I fought the shadows. I fought the beast. Do you remember the tale of the starving wolf who chewed off his own leg just to escape an iron trap? That was exactly how I felt right now. I was tearing my own mind apart just to get away from her soothing magic. Despite that, I pushed forward through the dense, wet trees. The enemy camp was quiet. Tents flapped softly in the cold wind. Next, I silently took down 2 armed guards. I choked them out before they could even scream. I slipped right into Lord Vane's massive, luxurious main tent. What followed was a frantic search in the total darkness. I tore through his expensive silk trunks. I tossed heavy velvet coats aside. My chest ached with the burning need to get back to my mate. Eventually, I found a hidden wooden floorboard under his thick rug. I ripped it up with my bare, bleeding hands. Inside the dusty hole sat a heavy, black iron lockbox, but wait. Who was the traitor inside my own castle passing him our secret patrol maps? I saw a folded note bearing the Citadel's wax seal sitting right on top of the box. That terrifying question burned a new hole in my mind. Because of that, my hands shook violently with rage. I smashed the heavy iron lock with the hilt of my dagger. Crack. In that moment, the lid popped open. Inside, there was an old, leather-bound journal wrapped in dark, rotting magic. I grabbed the book tightly. The same foul smell of my curse wafted right off the yellowed pages. I had the evidence, but I didn't know what it meant yet. I opened the book, completely unaware that the ugly truth inside would shatter my entire world. Chapter 11. When I was a little boy, my mother told me a terrifying story about a dark, evil wizard who drank innocent blood just to live forever. I thought it was just a silly children's fairy tale. Truth be told, Monsters are actually very real, and they wear expensive silk suits. With a single glance at Vane's messy handwriting, my heart completely stopped. I stood alone in the dark, freezing tent. I read the pages by the faint, pale moonlight. "The blood of the royal king has been spilled," Vane wrote on the very first page. "The pack is dead. The magic is mine." My breath caught. My stomach twisted violently. What's worse, the next page detailed a horrific, ancient blood spell. Vane didn't just slaughter Selah's innocent family to steal her shiny crown. He used their spilled royal blood to forge a demonic weapon. He used it to curse the strongest alpha in the land to keep anyone from ever challenging his stolen rule. As the truth unraveled, the heavy journal slipped right out of my numb hands. It hit the dirt floor with a soft thud. Between one breath and the next, a profound, agonizing realization hit me like a runaway train. I was the cursed alpha. They were two completely different halves of the exact same dark spell. Because her father's royal blood fueled my dark curse, I was literally carrying the brutal murder of her family right inside my own veins. As if the world narrowed, I dropped to my knees. The air thickened. I couldn't breathe. He stole her crown. He stole my sanity. He stole our future. To make things worse, I realized why my monster bowed to her. My curse was sustained by her family's magic. It recognized its true master. We weren't just destined mates. We were a magical, bloody tragedy. But what was the secret, ancient incantation Vane used to originally bind the spell? I still didn't know how to break it. Yet the agonizing guilt was eating me alive. I was a walking, breathing tomb for her dead parents. While my pulse raced, a tear fell from my eye and hit the cold dirt. I was the very monster she had been running from her entire life. How could she ever look at me again? How could she ever forgive my cursed existence? I had to go back to the castle and look the woman I loved right in the eye, knowing my monster was feeding on her worst nightmare. Chapter 12. Come morning, I kicked open the heavy oak doors to my bedroom. I was covered in cold mud, dark sweat, and pure misery. Selah was pacing fiercely near the glowing fireplace. She wore a simple white gown. She looked like an absolute angel. She was my cure. She was my curse. She was my queen. The moment our eyes locked, she ran toward me. "Kaelin!" she cried out softly. She reached out to touch my dirty face. Before she could move any closer, I violently flinched. I stepped backward. I couldn't let her touch my poisoned skin. "Don't," I choked out. My voice broke completely. "Stay away from me, Selah." As the silence stretched, her beautiful face dropped in pure confusion. "What happened? You're bleeding." Because I fully expected her to run away in terror, I simply handed her the stolen leather journal. My hands trembled like falling leaves in a winter storm. "Read it," I whispered, my chest aching. "Read what he did to me, with the blood of your family." In the stillness that followed, she opened the old book. She read the dark pages. Her amber eyes widened in absolute horror. The color completely drained from her soft face. A tiny, heartbroken gasp escaped her lips. Have you ever watched the sun literally fall out of the sky? That was what it felt like watching her read the brutal truth. I waited for her disgust. I waited for her to scream at me. I waited for the heavy slap across my face. Instead, she slowly closed the book. The book fell from her hands. Without another word, she stepped right up to me. She didn't run away. Rather, she grabbed my large, dirty hands. She pressed them firmly against her own beating heart. "This is not your fault," she said fiercely, her voice totally unwavering. "But the monster inside me," I sobbed, finally breaking down. "It lives on your family's death." "The monster inside you protected me," she yelled back, her eyes blazing with golden fire. "Vane did this to us. Vane is the enemy." Because her love was so much stronger than my monster, The walls around my heart shattered into a million tiny pieces. I fell to my knees, wrapping my arms tightly around her waist. I buried my crying face into her stomach. She gently stroked my messy hair. "We are going to make him pay," she whispered darkly into the quiet room. "We are going to tear his empire down to the ash." And from that exact moment, we were fully committed to a bloody, unforgiving war. Chapter 13. The Citadel felt like a cage that was slowly shrinking. I could feel the walls closing in on us, the pressure building until the stone began to crack. Truth be told, I knew Vane wasn't just sitting in his camp anymore. He was hunting us. "We need to leave," I whispered to Sella. We were standing in the darkest corner of the throne room. My pack was already packed, heavy with silver blades and dry rations. "Where can we go?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but her eyes held a storm. Before the words left her lips, I knew the answer. The cursed woods. It was the only place on this earth that even Vane's spies were too terrified to enter. Because the woods were saturated with wild, ancient magic, they were the perfect place to hide, and the perfect place to hunt for the magical anchor Vane used to bind his spell. "The cursed woods," I said. As the wind shifted outside the high windows, a cold draft blew through the hall. Sella didn't hesitate. She didn't question my madness. She just nodded, her jaw set with a fierce, royal resolve. "Then we go," she said. We slipped out through the secret tunnels, the ones my ancestors built for escape. It was a long, dark climb through jagged rock and suffocating shadows. My skin crawled, the curse beneath it pulsing in a rhythmic, angry beat that matched the thumping of my heart. Still, I felt alive. By the time we emerged into the overgrown, twisted underbrush of the woods, the sky had turned a bruised, deep purple. The trees here didn't just grow. They reached for you with gnarled, skeletal fingers. "Do you feel that?" she asked, her voice a low hum. "I feel it," I growled. The bond pulsed. It was a golden hum in the back of my brain, a beacon in the darkness. I grabbed her hand, our skin locking together with a spark that lit up the gloom. As we walked, the forest seemed to hold its breath. We were no longer just a cursed king and a rogue heir. We were hunters, and the target was the man who had destroyed our lives. Chapter 14. The deeper we pushed into the heart of the cursed woods, the more the air felt heavy, like a liquid weight pressing against my lungs. Soon after, the trees began to bleed. Thick, black sap dripping from wounds in the bark that looked suspiciously like human eyes. "He's close," Selah said, her hand tightening around mine. I stopped. I smelled it before I saw it, the scent of ozone, rotting metal, and the unmistakable, foul signature of the blood curse. It was coming from a clearing just ahead. What followed was a scene from a nightmare. In the center of the clearing stood a monolithic stone altar, etched with runes that made my eyes water just looking at them. It was the anchor. Vane had tethered our fates to this jagged piece of rock. "Kaelin," she whispered, pointing. There were no guards. Vane didn't need them. The magic itself was the gatekeeper. Because I knew what had to be done, I let go of her hand. My heart felt like it was being crushed in a vice. To break the anchor, I had to be vulnerable. I had to let the curse take me completely, pulling the infection out of my blood and into the stone. "If I lose myself," I started, but she cut me off. "You won't," she said. She reached out, her fingers tracing the line of my jaw. "I'm right here. I'm the light, Kaelin. Trust me." I closed my eyes. I reached deep into my chest, past the human man, past the king, and found the beast. I opened the cage. Without warning, the world exploded into agony. My bones shattered, reforming into something larger, sharper, and darker. I felt my humanity receding, a tide going out, leaving only the hunger and the howl. I hit the ground on all fours, a massive, midnight-furred wolf with eyes like molten gold. I growled, the sound a low, earth-shaking vibration. My mind was a chaotic mess, a sea of shadows. Then I felt it, a soft, warm pressure against my forehead. Selah. She was pushing her own golden fire into my mind, acting as a compass. She didn't run. She didn't flinch. She knelt in the dirt, her hands pressed against my matted fur, grounding the monster. I turned toward the altar and lunged. Chapter 15. The impact was like hitting a wall of solid ice. I snarled, my teeth sinking into the stone, tearing at the ancient runes. Instead of breaking, the anchor fought back. It sent a surge of pure, dark energy through my jaw, rattling my brain. I felt the curse fighting to stay inside me. I was the host, and it was a parasite. It didn't want to leave. "Kaelin, now!" Selah screamed. She slammed her palms onto the altar, her own royal blood igniting like sunlight on the dark rock. As her magic met my curse, the energy in the clearing reached a fever pitch. The trees groaned, their branches whipping in a wind that came from nowhere. It was a battle of wills. I felt the last of the infection rip away from my marrow, flowing into the stone. The agony was exquisite. I was being hollowed out, filled with nothing but cold, empty space. My wolf let out a long, shuddering howl that echoed for miles. Then the stone shattered. It didn't just break, it detonated. Dark, shadowy mist poured out of the ruins, dissipating into the night air. I slumped to the ground, my body convulsing as I shifted back. My human skin was cold, shivering, and covered in filth. I opened my eyes. Selah was there, her face pale, her hands shaking, but her smile was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I reached for her, my fingers brushing her cheek. "It's gone," I whispered. My voice sounded different, clearer, lighter. She leaned into my hand, her eyes shining. We did it. For a brief, precious moment, the world was quiet. But then, the sound of steel hitting steel echoed from the edge of the woods. My pack was under attack. Vane had anticipated our move. He hadn't just watched. He had laid a trap to keep us here while he burned my citadel to the ground. As her wolf stirred, I stood up, my legs trembling but my heart steady. We had won the battle, but the war had just shifted into its final, most dangerous gear. The citadel was burning, and we were still miles away. We had to move, and we had to move now. Chapter 16. The sky was choking on black smoke. I smelled it before I even saw the gates. My beautiful home, the Iron Citadel, was dying. Great orange tongues of fire licked the stone battlements, turning the night into a hellscape. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Kaelin, stop!" Selah screamed. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I sprinted toward the main gate, my boots pounding the dirt. The iron gates were barred, and the portcullis was lowered. Standing on the wall looking down at us like a king was Vane. He held my head commander by the hair, a dagger pressed to his throat. "Look who decided to join the funeral," Vane called out. His voice was smooth, oily, and filled with poisonous hate. I felt the ground tremble beneath me. I had broken the curse, but Vane had found a new way to torment me. He didn't need the old blood spell when he had my own people as hostages. "Let them go, Vane!" I roared. My voice cracked the night air. He just laughed. Without warning, he reached into his tunic and pulled out a jagged, glowing shard of bone. A second blood relic. He smashed it against the stone wall. The air hummed with a sick, vibrating sound. Suddenly, my head exploded with pain. The relic didn't just cast a spell. It hijacked my senses. It didn't matter that the curse was gone from my marrow. This magic forced my wolf to the surface, twisting it, bending it, making me look like the mindless monster Vane claimed I was. My vision blurred red. My skin began to tear, not from a natural shift, but from a forced, violent transformation. I fought it. I dug my nails into the dirt. I snarled, trying to keep the beast inside, but the magic was too strong. I lost control. I lunged at the gates, my hands turning into claws, my mind dissolving into a pit of mindless, hungry rage. The people on the walls screamed. They didn't see their king fighting to save them. They saw a monster, a beast, a tyrant. Vane had won the crowd's hearts, and he had destroyed my reputation in a single cruel stroke. I was losing the battle for my kingdom, and I was losing the battle for my own mind. Everything I built was crumbling to ash, and I was the one holding the torch. Chapter 17. That was the moment I realized I had to break her heart to save her life. I was on my hands and knees, fur sprouting along my arms, the feral growl ripping through my chest. The relic was twisting my thoughts, making me want to tear anything moving to pieces. My wolf eyes locked onto Selah. She was inches away, her hands glowing with her own golden magic, trying to soothe me, trying to heal the relic's poison. "Kaelin, fight it!" she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. I looked at her. I saw the pure love in her eyes. I saw our future, and I saw how it was going to end if I stayed. If I stayed, this mindless beast would eventually kill her. I couldn't let that happen. Not ever. I grabbed my own throat, forcing my voice to work. "Go!" I snarled, the word barely human. "Get out of here, you filthy rogue!" She flinched as if I'd struck her. "No, I'm not leaving you!" "Go!" I screamed, turning the hate inward. I forced myself to spit at her feet, to turn my back, to pretend she meant nothing to me. It felt like dying. It was a jagged knife in my gut. As she hesitated, I let the beast fully take the wheel. I swung a clawed hand, missing her on purpose by a hair, smashing a stone statue behind her. "Run!" I roared. She turned and fled into the dark woods, her sobs echoing in the night. As soon as she was gone, the fight left me. I was exhausted. I was broken. The guards swarmed me then, their silver spears pinning me to the ground. Vane stepped down from the walls, his boots crunching on the gravel. He loomed over me, his smile wide and triumphant. "The king is defeated," he announced to the cowering crowd. They dragged me toward the dungeons. I didn't fight. I didn't growl. I just let the cold, heavy chains lock around my wrists. I had saved her from the monster, but I had lost everything else. The crown, my kingdom, and the only woman who ever saw me as human. All gone. Darkness swallowed me whole as they threw me into the deep, wet hole beneath the citadel. Chapter 18. The cell was a tomb. It smelled of rot, old blood, and despair. I sat on the cold, wet floor, my head resting against the rough stone wall. The chains dug into my skin, but I didn't feel them. I felt empty. The wolf inside me was silent. It was broken. It was mourning. Still, I waited for the end. Moments later, the heavy iron door creaked open. Vane stepped inside, a torch held high, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. He looked at me with such pity. It was worse than hate. "You were so close, Kaelin," he said, pacing back and forth like a caged predator. "You almost had your kingdom. You almost had the girl. And now, you have nothing. Just a damp grave." I didn't answer. I didn't have the strength. "Do you know what I'll do tomorrow?" Vane continued, his voice dripping with malice. "I'll march into those woods. I'll hunt her down. And I'll bring her back here to watch your execution." My chest ached. That was the final blow. He was going to use her to kill me. He was going to turn my failure into her end. "Leave me," I whispered. "Oh, I'm leaving you," Vane laughed. "I'm leaving you to rot." He left, and the heavy door slammed shut with a final, echoing thud. The darkness rushed back in. I leaned my head back, closing my eyes. I was at the bottom of the well. There was no magic left, no plan, no strength. The wolf was gone. The king was gone. I was just a man waiting for the dark to take him. But then, a tiny, faint pulse of heat flared in my chest. It was so small, I thought I was hallucinating. It was a rhythmic thumping, a spark of gold in the sea of black. It was her. Deep down, the bond wasn't dead. It was just sleeping. She was still alive. She was still fighting. A tiny, fragile seed of hope began to bloom in the freezing, dead soil of my heart. I wasn't dead yet, and as long as she was breathing, Vane was going to have a very, very bad day. Chapter 19. The spark in my chest didn't just flicker, it grew. It was a golden, burning star in the pitch-black sky of my despair. Soon after, I felt her. Not just her presence, but her fury. It was a cold, sharp, royal anger. Sela wasn't hiding. She was moving. She was at the edge of the cursed woods, and she wasn't alone. She was whispering to the trees, to the outcasts, to the rogues who had lived in the shadows for years. She was building an army out of the forgotten. In the span of a breath, I understood. I had been looking for a king in the mirror, but I was looking at the wrong man. The wolf inside me wasn't a monster I had to cage. It was a part of me I had to lead. Still, I pulled at my chains. I didn't use force this time. I used my mind. I reached for the wolf. I didn't push him away. Instead, I welcomed him. I felt the surge of primal power, the razor-sharp senses, the lethal grace. It wasn't a curse. It was a weapon. I am Kaelin, I whispered to the dark, and this is my skin. As the bond pulsed, I felt her call out to me. Come home, the feeling seemed to say. We are waiting. Without warning, I lunged. I didn't shift fully, but I pushed a fraction of that wild, wolfish strength into my muscles. The heavy iron chains groaned. Metal screeched against stone. I put every ounce of my hate for Vane and every ounce of my love for Sela into one final, violent pull. Snap! The iron rings shattered like glass. I fell to the floor, my breath coming in jagged, relieved gasps. I stood up, my body humming with a new, integrated power. I was no longer the man hiding from his beast. I was the man who had mastered it. Meanwhile, upstairs, the guards were changing shifts. I could hear their boots thumping on the stone floors, the clink of their steel armor. I walked to the door. I didn't need a key. I just needed to be the alpha. I slammed my shoulder into the wood and the door exploded outward, splintering into 1,000 pieces. Before the guards could even reach for their swords, I was moving. I was a shadow in the dark, a blur of teeth and steel. I took them down without a sound. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was taking my life back. Chapter 20. The Citadel was eerily quiet. It felt like the world was holding its breath. Because of that, every footstep sounded like a drum beat. I moved through the shadows, avoiding the light. I needed to find her. I needed to see her face. Just like that, I saw a familiar silhouette near the servants' entrance. She was standing in the moonlight, her hair wild, her eyes glowing with that unmistakable amber fire. Behind her stood a dozen rogues, the outcasts, the survivors, the ones Vane had tried to erase. Selah, I whispered. She spun around. Her hand flew to her dagger, but then she saw me. The tension in her shoulders melted. She didn't say a word. She just sprinted. I caught her in my arms, and for a second, time stopped. She smelled like pine, like rain, and like victory. I buried my face in her neck, breathing in the scent that had kept me sane in the dark. You're alive, she sobbed, clutching my shirt. I'm here, I promised. I'm not going anywhere. In fact, she pulled back, her eyes hard and focused. She pointed toward the great hall. He's there, Kaelin. He's waiting for us. He thinks you're rotting in a hole and he thinks I'm running scared. Then let's show him he's wrong, I growled. As if pulled by a string, the rogues stepped forward. We were an army of 2, plus the ones the world forgot. We didn't have armor or armies. We had the truth, and we had each other. More importantly, I felt the beast resting comfortably in my mind. He was quiet, alert, and ready. We were one soul now. No more chains, no more secrets. Tonight, I said, looking at my people, we take our home back. A low rumble of agreement passed through the group. We moved like smoke through the corridors. Every step felt like a victory. Every turn brought us closer to the heart of the monster. Vane was sitting on a throne that didn't belong to him, and he was about to learn that you cannot steal what you do not understand. Chapter 21. The great hall doors were massive, carved from ironwood and reinforced with heavy steel. As we approached, the sound of music and laughter spilled out. Vane was celebrating. He was hosting a banquet for his sycophants, drinking wine that belonged to my father, sitting on a chair that belonged to me. "Are you ready?" I asked Selah. She looked at me, and I saw everything in her eyes: the pain, the loss, the love, and the terrifying, beautiful future we were going to build. "As long as I'm with you," she whispered. Without another word, I kicked the doors. They didn't just swing open. They tore off their hinges, slamming into the stone walls with a deafening crash. The laughter in the hall died instantly. The music stopped. Hundreds of eyes turned toward the entrance. Vane sat on the throne, his cup halfway to his lips. He froze. His face went pale, then red with a bubbling, manic rage. "You!" he shrieked, standing up. "You were in the ground." I walked forward. I didn't run. I didn't rush. I walked like a king who had finally come home. "I was," I said, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. But the ground wasn't enough to hold me. As the silence roared, Selah stepped up beside me. She looked like a goddess of war, her presence radiating power that made the lords and ladies in the room shrink back in their seats. "And I," she said, her voice clear and cutting, "have come for my crown." Vane drew his sword. His hand was shaking. "Kill them!" he screamed at his guards. "Kill them all!" The hall erupted into chaos. Steel clashed against steel. The rogues poured in, a wave of desperate, hungry wolves reclaiming their territory. I didn't look back. My eyes were fixed on the throne. My eyes were fixed on Vane. The distance between us burned. I felt the bond pulse, a drumbeat of war in my veins. "This ends now," I growled. Vane lunged. I met him in the middle of the room. The clash of our blades rang out like a bell, signaling the beginning of the end. We were no longer fighting for the throne. We were fighting for the soul of the kingdom, and I knew with every heartbeat that I was finally going to win. Chapter 22. Steel rang against steel in the center of the hall. The sound was a jagged, piercing song of death. Vane was fast, his movements fueled by the dark, rotting magic he had stolen. I parried his blow, my teeth bared, my muscles burning. I wasn't fighting as a man anymore. I was fighting as the alpha, the king, the beast. At the same time, Selah stood nearby, her hands glowing with pure, blinding light. She was striking at the magical constructs Vane raised from the floor. "Kaelin, take him!" she shouted. Without warning, Vane swung a heavy, shadow-infused blade toward my head. I ducked, feeling the cold wind of the steel pass over my hair. I lunged, my claws ripping through his fine silk tunic. He gasped, falling backward onto his throne. "You are nothing!" Vane screamed. He reached into his robes and pulled out the final, jagged piece of the blood relic. He smashed it against the arm of the throne. In that moment, the entire room turned black. A whirlpool of shadows erupted, trying to swallow us whole. It was a vacuum, pulling the life out of everything it touched. My wolf whimpered in my mind. It was hungry. It was tired. "Kaelin, give it to me!" Selah yelled. I didn't think. I didn't hold back. I reached out and grabbed her hand, linking our souls. "Take it!" I roared. With every heartbeat, I channeled my entire self, my rage, my love, my cursed history, directly into her. Selah took my power and mixed it with her royal fire. The resulting blast was like a supernova inside the hall. The shadows didn't just fade, they evaporated. Vane looked up, his face twisted in pure, unadulterated terror as the light hit him. "No!" he choked out. The light consumed him. It tore the stolen magic from his body, turning him into a hollow, broken shell. He collapsed. The throne room went silent. The heavy, oppressive weight that had ruled my life for years simply vanished. I stood over him, my chest heaving. The beast inside me was calm, resting quietly like a loyal dog at my feet. I looked at Selah. She was glowing, her hair floating in the residual magic. "He's gone," she whispered. I looked around the room. The court was silent. The guards dropped their weapons. I didn't see fear in their eyes anymore. I saw shock. I saw awe. I saw the truth. The tyrant was dead, and the king had finally returned to his people. Chapter 23. The dust in the hall settled like gray snow. It coated the floor, the throne, and the broken bodies of Vane's guards. Truth be told, I felt a strange, hollow peace. My body was covered in scrapes, and my blood mixed with the dirt, but the crushing weight of the curse was gone. The air felt thin, clean, and sweet. Soon after, the heavy silence broke. A lone noble, a duke who had once feared me, stepped forward. He slowly, respectfully, knelt on the floor. "My king," he said, his voice shaky but clear. One by one, the others followed. It wasn't the forced, terrified bowing from before. This was genuine. They saw what I had done. They saw the cost of my survival. "Get up," I said. My voice was raspy, but it carried the weight of a true ruler. I turned to Selah. She looked exhausted, her face pale, but her amber eyes were bright with unshed tears. She stumbled, and I caught her, pulling her against my chest. Her warmth soaked into me, washing away the last of the adrenaline. "We made it," she murmured into my shoulder. "We did," I said. In the quiet that followed, the weight of the last few years seemed to lift off my shoulders. I looked at my hands. They were just human hands. No claws. No dark veins. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "For all of it. For the fear. For the walls." Selah pulled back and touched my face. "You survived. That's all that matters." Between one breath and the next, the fear of the future evaporated. We were a team. We were a pack. I had spent my entire life trying to control everything, to build a cage for the monster, but the real power was in letting go and trusting the woman who looked at me not as a tyrant but as her equal. We were finally home. Chapter 24. Months later, the Citadel looked different. The fires were long extinguished, and the dark, heavy stone had been polished clean. Flowers grew in the courtyard where Vane's guards once patrolled. People walked the halls, and for the first time I heard real laughter. That night, I stood on the wide balcony overlooking the kingdom. The air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and new beginnings. I heard the soft click of boots on the stone floor behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know it was her. Selah walked up beside me, resting her hands on the cold stone railing. She looked out at the lights of the town below. "It's peaceful," she said. "It is," I agreed. I turned to look at her. She wasn't just my mate. She was my partner. We had rebuilt this place together, stone by stone. I realized then that I had been wrong about the crown. It wasn't a burden meant for one person to bear in the dark. It was a responsibility shared in the light. "Are you happy?" I asked. She looked up at me, her amber eyes reflecting the stars above. "I'm with you. Why wouldn't I be?" I pulled her into my arms, holding her close. The beast inside me was quiet, a gentle purr in the back of my mind. It wasn't gone. It was integrated, a part of my soul that made me stronger, not weaker. I had surrendered my iron control, and in doing so, I had found the ultimate freedom. "We did it, Selah," I whispered. "We're just getting started," she replied. As the wind shifted, carrying the sound of the kingdom breathing below us, I knew one thing for sure. I would never be the tyrant again. I was a man who had faced his own darkness and found the light of a queen who refused to let me fall. That's why, as I looked toward the horizon, I knew we would survive whatever came next. We were the crown of ash and flame, forged in the fire of our past and bound by the magic of our future. And as I kissed her, the darkness was gone, leaving only the beautiful, terrifying, infinite possibilities of a life finally lived without fear. The end.